What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad. The final picks, Judd, are coming off the board right now, but the Vikings are done. Their final pick at number 219 overall. They end up with 4 offensive players, 5 defensive players, and a kicker. That might be the most interesting pick out of these ones on the final day.
The kicker, I'm not sure I get. I understand this team is rebuilding. Ryan Longwell's a veteran. He's eventually going to have to be replaced, although he's signed for a few more years. But to me, Tom, these picks, third-day picks, people want to judge them, and they want to judge the players, and they want to say who are the starters. Well, we don't know that. You cannot gauge these players right now. What you can gauge is the positions that they're picked at. The 2 that surprised me today on Saturday were these. The kicker surprised me, and drafting a H-back tight end who I think might help replace Kleinsasser, it surprised me a little bit. It didn't stun me. It surprised me because I thought there were other positions of need. For instance, linebacker, which they didn't address till the 7th round. Leslie Frazier talked to us yesterday about the need to pick up a linebacker, about how they were short at linebacker. And it's not that they need starting linebackers, it's they need special teams guys. So I was a little bit surprised about those 2 picks today. But as far as trying to grade these guys and what they're going to do and if they can step in and start, come on, folks, we have no idea.
Right. The H-back was an interesting one, too, because this is a guy who said he didn't expect to get drafted. He's out on the river taking it easy for the day. Yep. He was ready to move on. He's finishing up his master's degree in some sort of a communications field. He didn't think he was going to be picked. He's picked in the 4th. That does not happen a whole lot.
He's not only picked in the 4th round, he not only didn't expect to be picked, but he said that when the Vikings called, he was so emotional when he got that call that he started crying, and he couldn't understand a thing they were saying and vice versa because he was just sitting there crying. It's a great story. It's a fantastic story, but why on earth are you picking a kid who doesn't expect to be drafted in the 4th round?
Well, the thing is, you're always looking for traits. That's what you're scouting. It's not always necessarily the production or how you were used. It's the traits. And you look at the guy, he's 6'5", 250 pounds, primarily a blocker, but has been used in a lot of that motion stuff, the way that they move their H-backs in and out of the backfield. You got to remember, John Carlson and Kyle Rudolph, I think, ultimately are both geared to be inline tight ends. Kyle Rudolph is probably a backside pass-catching type. John Carlson's probably going to be used a little bit more like Visanthe Shanko was. If you can get a guy now who's a big sledgehammer in the backfield who can move in and out and also be a tight end, almost a Jeff Dugan, but a more talented Jeff Dugan in theory, I get it. In the 4th does seem to be aggressive.
That's my point. Why not address linebacker in the 4th, for instance, where you need help, and then address this kid, try and get this kid later on in the draft? I mean, flat out, this kid said, I didn't expect to be drafted. 4th round's a pretty high pick, Tom, to take this kid at.
In the end, you're drafting players, not positions, and you're drafting the guys where you want to get them. It's clear that guy was a target. It's clear that Blair Walsh was a target. I understand Walsh, the kicker out of Georgia, in this regard in the 6th round, because if you have draftable grades on only 2 kickers, and one of them had just gone off, the Zierlein kid who they had in here for a visit, you're going to draft the other. They obviously liked him a lot, though, too, because they sent Mike Prefer secretly down to work him out. He does have a big leg. I think he's 10 of 14 or 10 of 17 in his career at Georgia from 50 yards and beyond. They obviously want to see exactly what they might be able to get out of this kid. Didn't have a good senior year. Part of the reason he's probably available in the 6th round, the guy was that strong of a leg, but when you gave Ryan Longwell a $3.5 million bonus last year.
That's the thing. When is Ryan Longwell? I mean, are you going to now turn around a year later and cut Ryan Longwell for this kid? It just surprised me a little bit. You're right. You draft players, not positions. But in my mind, you are sort of drafting positions right now because you're, to be frank about it, you're undergoing a really big rebuilding process. So you are drafting, in my mind, a lot of positions. You're going after positions. You're looking for what you need to fill. And then, because Tom, think about this. At the end of this process, when you're trying to add guys, at the very end, don't you then add guys like kickers, wide receivers, guys who can put you in the playoffs? The Vikings are nowhere near that right now.
Right.
So going after a kicker does surprise me a little bit, given, like you said, you just paid Ryan Longwell a lot of money. Are you now going to cut Ryan Longwell and absorb that? You might.
Here's an interesting way to look at this, too. Think back to when the lockout was lifted last year, and that week after it was lifted, who did they go out and sign? They went out and signed Longwell to that deal. Now they've drafted a kicker to potentially replace him. They signed Remy Adel, and they gave him, I think, a $3 million bonus on his deal. Michael Jenkins. They just drafted 2 receivers in the 4th round. They've already signed Jerome Simpson. Is there a role for Michael Jenkins going forward here? You can look at a bunch of the guys that they brought in that span. Charlie Johnson, they signed to be their left tackle. Now he's kicking into guard. He'll be a part of the team.
Right.
But a lot of the other guys they brought in, we knew it was going to be a little bit of a crapshoot. They were signing guys sight unseen. I don't put Ryan Longwell's struggles last season a lot on him. He did have that stretch in the middle of the season where I think he missed wide left 3 games in a row. But then the way that it came apart at the end, there were so many things going on with that operation. He's 37 years old.
And don't forget, Cullen Loeffler was lost late last season.
Right, and that's what I mean by the operation.
And there were some bad snaps.
Matt Catula was terrible.
Yeah.
And there's a reason he's not going to be in the NFL again. But with Longwell, how much of that do you put on him, and how much of it is them looking at it and saying, we've got to be able to kick the ball away more? You look at it, Brian Longwell had a career-high 18 touchbacks last year, but there were guys in the league with 50 touchbacks.
Right. And the question then becomes, do you now eat 2 roster spots, one for Longwell to serve as your kicker, and one for Blair Walsh to serve as your kickoff specialist? It's possible. It's just, if you ask me today, there were 2 interesting moves made, and the one is the H-back tight end, and the other is the kicker.
Look at the rest of the names they drafted. We didn't do a video yesterday, so we'll touch on Josh Robinson, the cornerback from Central Florida. Fastest guy at the NFL Scouting Combine, fastest 40-yard dash run, has a huge vertical jump. Certainly that was a position of need. If Jermaine Johnson hadn't come off the board right before the Vikings picked, I wonder if they would have gone with him out of Montana instead, but they get a really fast guy. They come back to the defensive backfield with Robert Blanton, corner out of Notre Dame, Harrison Smith's former teammate today. And you've also got Red Ellison, who we mentioned earlier, the H-back from USC. Greg Childs and Jarius Wright, both receivers from Arkansas, taken from the same town in Arkansas, taken 16 picks apart, totally different sorts of players. Jarius Wright is a little bit of a slot guy. I had heard that they were going to try to find a receiver who was a speed guy and might be a little bit like Percy Harvin, because they still don't trust that Percy Harvin can stay on the field. Jarius Wright looks to be that sort of a guy. Not that he's going to be to Percy Harvin's level. There's a reason he's in the 4th. Percy was a 1, but they're trying to find another guy who might be able to do some of the same sorts of things.
2 guys with position flexibility, too. Robert Blanton sounds like he could play safety as well. So it sounds like there's a chance that he'll get here. He's been told that today the team didn't tell him what they want him to do. He's listed as a corner on the draft sheet, but he could play safety.
And a little bit like Mr. O. Raymond last year.
Yes, exactly. And Trevor, is it Guyton from California?
Yes.
The last pick in the draft. He is listed as a defensive end, but he could also move inside. So there's some position flexibility there. So they have 2 guys that they can get here and pretty much decide at that point where they're going to play.
Another guy that I think is interesting, we mentioned him briefly there, but Greg Childs, a receiver from Arkansas, he's a bigger receiver, had a patella tendon injury in October of 2010. Those injuries take a while to come back from, and there have been studies done on the patella tendon injuries. The most common, or the most known guy recently who had one was Cadillac Williams, who was never quite the same after that injury.
Right.
So you do wonder, can he regain it? But you look at what that guy was circa his junior year, and if he hadn't gotten hurt, where he might have been drafted. Those are the sorts of guys in the 4th round. You're going to get guys with marks for one reason or another. Is it they're too small to play the position? Is it Everson Griffin and nobody in the NFL trusts him? Is it a guy who's had an injury? Those are the sorts of guys that are trying to get at the guys with necks on.
Greg Childs, too, he said he came back from that injury in 6 months. He said it's about a year and a half.
He said process. It was too soon.
Yeah, he rushed back. The question with him is, do they think in him, because he's a bigger guy, that he is sort of their Sidney Rice type of guy, too? Can he go up and get the ball? Can he be a guy that Ponder can throw the ball
I don't know that he's got the speed, but we'll see.
Well, Rice was fast, but what I'm saying is, could Childs be the guy who can go up and get the ball for him? Because, as you said, Jarius Wright's a little guy. Jarius Wright's a Percy Harvin type of guy. He's going to be a speedster from the slot. But they still need somebody who they can throw to, especially red zone, on the fade pass and things like that, who can go get the ball. They just don't have that right now.
And the other guy, Audie Cole, linebacker on North Carolina State, he was one of the guys I mentioned coming into the draft because he played middle linebacker for them. Down at the Senior Bowl, they had both those guys. They had the kid from Nevada, too, with 3 names. I can't remember his name, Johnson. Both those guys, though, I knew that the linebackers coaches liked them. They ended up getting Cole in the 7th round. He's a huge guy, 6'4" and 250 pounds as a middle linebacker. Interested to see exactly how that guy fits in. But look at that position right now behind Jasper Brinkley. What do they have?
Most important thing with Audie Cole, too, is the first 3 years that he was in college, he played a ton of special teams. If Audie Cole's going to make this team, make this 53-man roster in 2012, he's going to play a lot of special teams. That's what this team needs. I mean, you look at special teams last year. Look at what they did. They need guys that can step in immediately, not in a year, not in 2 years, immediately, and help them on special teams.
Draft is wrapping up, but full coverage of the Vikings at 1500ESPN.com continues as always. He's Judd.
We're punch drunk.
Oh, I thought you said
punch drunk. Not drunk, punch drunk.
I thought you said something totally different. He is Judd. I'm Tom. See ya.